Hello, and welcome to the Wild Wild West podcast. My name is Richie Richey. Yes, this background is different, and it will be changed, perhaps even as the show goes on, to something a little bit more appropriate. I have moved my studio into a different location, and we will be sorting this out shortly. Over to my left, that way here. We have Alex Givens. You can catch him live, for the Fantasy Football Podcast, which now, and obviously during the season when fantasy is alive and well and going in full swing with him and Coach directly after this show. And you can also catch his articles on Airhead Addict. Down directly
and
below
my
here,
burner account.
Well, I wasn't going to throw that up in case you didn't want the second version of you to be shown live on there.
That's Bizarro, Alex, right there.
Yeah. I believe they call that the dark Alex or the black Alex, just like, Black Spider-Man, normal Spider-Man.
Exactly.
That's the other version of you.
Hey, why gotta be black Spider-Man? Why gotta be black Alex? That's racial as shit, man. That's racial as shit.
Dude, it's what the comic books did, and I'm simply just calling it as I see it. Directly below the man with all the impressions as well as show tunes is the one and the only, the Captain Jack Rackham. You can catch him almost every week on YouTube with a different show. Takes in viewer questions, covers a whole bunch of things. Yes, we are obviously missing Coach. This is the first show without Coach. We will have a fourth, hopefully shortly, who will be helping us cover the Chargers and bringing you some exciting angles from the Chargers' perspective shortly. There will be an announcement. Please go ahead and check our Twitter account out at Wild Wild West Pod on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I'm still working towards the whole use of the word X for Twitter, and we'll go from there. So, interesting news, Alex. I think we're going to cover off the first part of the show here, simply talking about the Chiefs game. It did not quite go as you planned in a good way.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't as close as I thought it would be. Definitely going into it. I know we talked about the weather. I'm not going to be a fool and act like that didn't play a factor in the game to some degree. But,
right.
I mean, you play the game where you play the game, So it was one team looked a little bit more prepared for it than the other one, and I think that's about as far as I need to go on talking about that. But I mean,
I think Herb said it best. Was he your coach when he said this? You play to win the game.
Yeah. He might have been. Yeah, I think that was in KC when he said that. Old Herb's got some juicy sound bites out there. but yeah, I mean, we saw the Chiefs win 26-7 in a pretty dominating fashion. I mean, mostly they did kind of what I talked about last week when I talked about kind of the biggest questions of the game. They seem to have an answer for essentially everything Miami was trying to do, and really outside of the first quarter, we saw a complete shutdown of what was the high-flying, explosive Dolphins offense. And sure, it might have been a little bit more high-flying if they were playing in, at South Beach in 75, 80-degree weather, but that's not where it was. So, with the circumstances that they were playing in, I mean, the team as a whole showed up, but the defense especially carried over that pretty dominating regular season performance. And in fact, I think, kind of engulfed this Miami offense even more than they did in Week 9 in Germany. Offensively, I think, I'd call it it was definitely a much better outing. I wouldn't say it was a confirmed step in the right direction of where things need to go. I mean, they had 408 yards on the day. Pacheco is a pretty reliable kind of bell cow. They seem to rely on the run. You kind of could have assumed going into it with the conditions that both teams would be, using the run a little bit more than probably they would like to. But Pacheco came out, had 89 yards and a rushing touchdown. Saw a decent outing from Mahomes at, 260 yards, a touchdown. No interceptions or any sort of fumbling from him. It was almost a turnover-free game. I would kind of call it a pseudo turnover-free game because Clyde Edwards-Helaire fumbled, but he shouldn't have really been out there, in my opinion. But,
and that was at the end of the game anyway, when it was already decided.
Yeah. So I mean, essentially a turnover-free game, which is definitely one of the keys I discussed going into it as kind of a deciding component of if it would be a good game for them or not. Harrison Butker was 4 for 4 on field goals, set a franchise record for the most in a single postseason game. Rashee Rice, another dominating performance from a rookie. He's yet to kind of hit that proverbial rookie wall. It seems like every week he, is asked to do more and more and delivers. He had 8 catches for 130 yards and a touchdown, which was a rookie franchise record, actually. I'm tossing out LeBron stats left and right now. He actually would have had another touchdown, too, if it wasn't called back for a penalty, which is not an enormous shocker at this point of this season for this Chiefs offense. But, yeah, I'd say overall you saw a lot more focused and polished offensive unit across the board. They seemed to eliminate a lot of the mistakes that kind of riddled them down, throughout the year. And especially when you get into the playoffs where it's put up or shut up and every team is a quote unquote, good team, like that's the kind of football you need to be playing. So, I think in that regard, it was a step in the right direction. That being said, though, we still saw them being, what were they, like, I think 0 for 4 or 2 out of 6 in the red zone. So, obviously with Butker hitting 4 for 4 field goals, that's, a good thing, but at the same time, you would like to see more points putting on the board in the form of a touchdown when you get down in the red zone, rather than ceding to field goals. With that being said, though, with how this defense is played and how they looked in the first, in this wild card round, I think that's a pretty successful recipe that this Chiefs team can rely on, which is something I've kind of harped on throughout the season, especially at our lowest points, in that, the offense just needs to not get in the defense's way. And not put them in tough situations by turning the ball over, not going 3 and out without gaining any yards and taking a minute off the clock. We saw the exact opposite of all of that stuff in this game. So, from that regard, a pretty solid showing from the offense. Would have liked to see a little bit more, out of Kelsey and maybe just a little bit more explosiveness. But at the same time, it's tough to ask for that when it hasn't really been there all year. And, you're playing in what was a negative 27-degree wind chill, which I believe was the 4th coldest game in NFL history. So certainly not the conditions to warrant a lot of explosion happening. But yeah, offensively, great game. Didn't seem to have any rust as well, which I know that's something that we talked about, Richie, last show, with him resting a lot of starters in week 18. Yeah. There wasn't any sort of lapse. I kind of expected maybe the beginning of the game might be a little slow and sluggish due to that, but it was pretty much all firing. And that you could, and the one thing is that you could tell they were way more comfortable and confident in what they were doing. I know you texted me about that Pacheco play that actually they kind of brought back, and that was a play they tried to run earlier in the year and fumbled. They just didn't have Pacheco try to pitch it this time. And it worked out, got a touchdown. And I think that's a sign of kind of the gelling happening at the right time, and guys are trusting people are going to be where they need to be and executing. So offensively, pretty solid performance. defensively, I mean, I'd say it's a spectacular performance. I mean, to only give up 7 points, and that was really in the first quarter on a long Tyreek touchdown that, McDuffie just kind of lost the ball in the air, which will happen. But, I mean, other than that, you saw him give up 76 rush yards on the day to what was one of the best, if not the best, rushing attack in the NFL in a game where running is going to be heavily focused on. You saw him get 2 sacks, which is another key point I discussed last week, and they have to get after Tua. And we also saw an interception. L'Jarius Sneed. I mean, the only thing I can say about his performance is you got to pay the man. Now, after this, he has just been unbelievably dominant this whole year. The fact that he wasn't an All-Pro is, it's a little disheartening. But go look at the stats. I mean, he is very much a travel corner, and he has shut down pretty much every wide receiver one he has gone against. And some of that may be as time gone on, he got the respected teams to not really try to test him. But I'm sure everyone saw the somewhat viral jam he had of Tyreek where he just put him on the ground and totally took him out of the play. I mean, the minute I saw that, I was like, yeah, that guy gets whatever money he wants. I'm sorry. It's either going to be in KC or it's going to be a lot somewhere else. But, not only that, he allowed just 2 receptions for 20 yards on 8 targets throughout the whole game. So,
where was he drafted? What spot?
It was late. I mean, he was out of Louisiana Tech, so he wasn't like a blue chip type. I think it was 4th, 5th round. And that's been a pretty key part of KC's success is they've been able to not maybe immediately hit on their later picks, but they can certainly develop them into key contributors. Before Snead, it was like Charvarius Ward, pretty similar. He got a big contract out in San Francisco, but I think they were in the same class or are pretty close to it. But yeah, I mean, so outside all those stats, you saw Miami was scoreless on 10 of 11 drives. So basically, like I said, shut them down after that Tyreek touchdown. They didn't have the ball for the whole third quarter, and they only converted 1 of 12 third down situations. So literally a pretty stifling and dominant performance from KC's defense. And also, like I said, they forced Tua to throw the ball outside, which, I think the narrative in Miami after this game has been, is Tua even the guy moving forward? I think to some degree they made it to where Tua had to win with his arm outside of what he's comfortable doing, and he showed he can't do that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, just overall, a great wild card win. Would like to have been at home for the whole playoffs, but hey, they survived and advanced, and are set up for what's probably going to be a little bit better and more competitive game in Buffalo. But as far as this, like I said, they seemingly had an answer for every question I had going into the game. Talked about knowing Fangio was going to be blitzing heavy, especially with the edge rushers they had hurt, and Mahomes and the whole offensive line. Seemingly was able to. There was several times in that game where Mahomes, you could hear him calling out a guy that was going to be blitzing, and then they gashed him for 10+ yards. So certainly had a answer for all that. Like I said, they responded to Miami's rushing attack in a huge way, and forced Tua to have to win the game with his arm and throwing outside the numbers. So all in all, pretty solid wild card showing from KC.
I'm not gonna lie. Alex, this is no shot. You and I were literally texting live during the game. And I was at a bar, believe it or not, with my whole family, and we were watching the game live, and I made multiple comments. My kids do on occasion watch the show, and I said I gotta text Alex, and they said, "Oh, good, say hi." And I didn't obviously pass that along because that was kind of weird. But at the same time, we all made a similar comment. Like my kids are saying, like, "Oh, Alex will be super happy,"
Oh yeah, I was ecstatic.
And I was like, you know, all of the concerns like in a checklist, right? Like if you were to just go, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Casey's like, Alex, just pass me a pen.
Yeah,
We're
like, good.
Yeah. And
literally,
I mean, you know, you have to be really happy with that as a KC fan. I guess getting back to Sneed, because there wasn't a ton that you can really knock in that game. I mean, it was one of the coldest games in NFL history.
Yeah.
Not the coldest, but certainly one of the coldest.
Yeah.
And so you can't play the way you normally would because it's just different conditions, okay? So I guess the question here is, getting back to Sneed, you got a dude who's legit, right? Like, I mean, he is that staple of that team that you would want to keep around. Is this a problem that you guys have waited this long to try to sign him, or were you just not able to before now?
You know, I think it was more of a, let's see. I mean, Veach has been a GM that very much likes to let the contract year play out. One, because, you know, that's the saying goes, the contract year's undefeated and getting the most out of someone. But I mean, like I said, I think you got to pay him. And I think this, it especially depending on where this postseason run goes. I mean, if they make it back to the Super Bowl and/or win it, big part of that's going to be the play of Sneed. So, and I mean, he's been a big part of their success all year. So, I mean, undoubtedly, I think you have to pay him. The unfortunate thing is, I think that the decision comes down to bringing, Sneed or Chris Jones back. And you know, I think looking at the two, at this stage, especially with the other young guys,
don't say
I think you got to I think you got to re-sign Sneed, and unless someone takes a team-friendly deal, you got to move on in some other spots, just because. But, you know, with that being said, they also have, you know, Trent McDuffie who's playing exceptionally well too, and maybe they feel more confident in, you know, paying Chris Jones a little bit for 2 more years and letting McDuffie take over the Sneed role and find someone younger to also plug in there. I mean, I don't know, but I think with how that game went and how this season's gone, especially defensively, I mean, you gotta make it almost priority one to re-sign him and keep him in the doors. I mean, Chris Jones obviously is still a dominating force. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he had 10.5 sacks and didn't play week 1, and I mean, wasn't doing any off-season stuff beforehand. But at the same time, you also got 10 sacks out of Karlaftis and 8 sacks out of Amenahue and 7 sacks out of Dana. So, I mean, you got production across the board there, whereas you look at the corners, I mean, if you didn't have Sneed, who knows how many teams' number one option would have, you know, changed the landscape of the game and cooked them. So, you know, it's a tough predicament to be in. Definitely, you know, one I'm sure a lot of teams would like to have. The problem of which good guy do we bring back? But
which top tier or top 5 guy do we try to re-sign as priority one? You know, there's a rough spot to be in, right? But ladies and gentlemen, before we continue on, want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, all of the fans in the chat. Lively conversation. I do want to say, I want to get these likes up, though. We need to get these videos out to get more people into the show, to have a more lively conversation with all of the different AFC West groups. I want to see as many likes as possible. If you are joining us live, please just click that like button. It is free, costs you nothing.
Like.
Yeah, it costs you nothing to do. Help support the channel big time. And if you are joining us after the fact, you can still like the video, but what also helps is commenting down below the video if you're catching us after the fact. Ask us questions, all that good stuff. It really does truly help all of our channels succeed and allow us to reach a broader audience. We can get more people just like you in here to have lively conversations every Wednesday night. So as we look forward, Alex, and kind of look at the past game just a little bit more, obviously a lot of things went well, and you saw improvements on certain elements. Just on your past comment, though, I really do. I mean, this comes as no surprise to you. I mean, we've done this for enough times and enough length. I actually think that Chris Jones is your most critical player. I don't care. You know, in my opinion, your defensive line makes Snead look better.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
And so like, if you're saying, Rich, I can choose one, I'm saying, all right, so here's your juxtapose. You have maybe two guys or one guy in the league that are better than Chris Jones at this point, and he's got a long way to fall before he's not even worthy of $20 million a year or $15 million a year, right? Based on NFL averages, right? Like, that's fair, right? Fair comment.
No, absolutely.
Yep. Okay, so you got that bar set here. Now, you've had quite a bit of success drafting cornerbacks that have been plug-and-play guys that have churned into that spot for you, as well as your number one pick in McDuffie. So I guess the question is Snead really that number one guy, or I'm basically trying to give you an opportunity to change your mind.
Yeah. I mean,
go.
It's honestly a 50-50 toss-up. Like I said, it's a hell of a predicament to be in because there's several questions with both players. I mean, Chris Jones obviously gets his own success. He has turned himself into the perennial pass rusher that he is. But like you said, you have to assess, well, is Snead's, is his numbers and performance due to the fact that our opposing QBs have, less than 2 seconds to even digest the coverage and get rid of the ball. And same when I talked about the other production they got in terms of sacks from players. You have to think, well, did Karlaftis get 10 sacks because the offensive line was more focused on chipping and helping Chris Jones and not giving up pressure to Jones, which thus opens the door for other people. So, I mean, both could be – there's a lot of what-ifs with both routes you take, but I don't think that either one is the incorrect one. Because, I mean, if you can, find some replaced production in terms of pressure, moving on from a Jones, then arguably you still have somewhat of the same quote unquote, pass rush abilities that you did have. And then, ideally the same shutdown corner. But then it's like, also, like I said, could they pay Chris Jones and just let McDuffie slide over and be the travel guy and get the same success that they saw this year? I mean, you just don't know. But I do think that Chris Jones being where he is in his career is certainly going to be less inclined to take any sort of team-friendly type deal, and is going to want to get as much of a bag as he can because it's probably the last contract he'd ever get outside of, 1 year deals just to kind of be around. Like I think we see Calais Campbell is a guy I think of like that. Like, I mean, he was a dominant defensive end forever, and now you see him just get these 1 year deals with teams, but he's still hanging around and putting up numbers. So
he is still a good player. That's the thing, right? There is nothing wrong at the back end of your career being a mercenary if you can still eat, right? And that's Calais Campbell, right? All day long. That is Calais Campbell.
He's also 6'8" and he's a massive beast. He is ungodly huge.
And sorry, Buwana, you are correct. Suh is another guy, or Sue is another dude that's exactly in that same kind of realm. Yeah. Although I'm going to argue that I think Calais Campbell's a better player. I mean, that may be controversial to some, but
he's certainly less dirty.
Yeah. let's just put it this way: he's never stomped on someone's head or anything.
You see Calais Campbell in Lowe's commercials and getting nominated for the Walter Payton Man of the Year. You don't see that with Sue.
No. There's a really, really interesting comment here again by Buwana. I want to bring it up.
Oh yeah,
for the panel. I love this just this. So all right. So ladies and gentlemen in the chat, I want your responses down below. I want to start pulling some stuff up here. All right, we're in year 2 of the format. I agree. So we now got 2 years of the new, and we're in the second year of the new, and we've got all the history of the old. Now what? Right? Like, at this point here, my team was almost as good as your team, and we should have made the playoffs. That was the argument for the current format, right? It was like, 2 teams with the same record should both be in, and blah, 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 and this, that, and the third. Fine. Okay, cool. That's what we got now. So are you finding this format more exciting? Are you enjoying this extra kind of playoff block? Or would you rather the NFL move back to kind of that do or die mentality that we saw from previous years, 3 years and prior? I think this is a beautiful question. Certainly does open the floodgates back open for, is the NFL truly the most competitive league still with the current format? Yes or no? I'll throw it over to both of you gentlemen. Captain, maybe start with you. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that having only the 1 seed earn a spot, actually, you have to wait until next week to see if that is advantageous or not. Because it used to be that, you would have the 2 teams that would out, and then they would, see if that 1 week off is hurtful to them or not. I mean, hell, Dallas got their ass whooped, and they were a number 2 seed.
Yeah.
So
that's what I was going to talk about, and
right.
it was the extra team that beat them.
I teed you up, brother. That's it, and that's it. The team that made it, that was the out. It makes it exciting for them. I think that I like the fact that there's only 1 team that's going to have the advantage, and it not necessarily will be an advantage for them. Okay, because we'll see if Baltimore maybe shits the bed, farts or whatever next week when they have the team that they want to play. I don't think it's gonna affect Kansas City, or sorry, a Freudian slip there, San Francisco, because it's the same icky red. Okay, I don't think it's gonna affect San Francisco as much because San Francisco is gonna host the Packers that beat the Cow Patties. We'll see what happens there, but I was telling the Buck fans, for those that didn't get a chance to see me, that's why I have my screen on pause. I saw myself on TV again on the Palmer touchdown, which is why I got it on freeze so I can get a picture of it later. I was telling the Buck fans, I said, hey, live it up, because you're going to Detroit and very likely coming back, and that's your last game. I said, but on the off chance that you don't and you move on, you're either going to go out to California to get your ass whooped, or you're going to host the team that beat the number 2 seed and the number 1 seed on successive weeks, and it's going to take a Florida vacation before they go to Vegas. I actually, that's the way it is. And I like the fact, like I said, that the Packers came in and whooped that ass. And we'll see. Man. We'll see. You can't really say right now what you prefer. I want to see how the ones come out. But obviously, the people that are in the playoffs that were the 2 seeds, and even the Eagles, who haven't been playing well for the last couple of weeks. I mean, I could have seen it. I didn't want to say anything. I said I thought that they would have played a lot better. I think they would have played better if Brown was there. I think that. Yeah. But then the Eagles' problems, again, I know I'm off. I apologize. This is normal me. I'm off topic. They couldn't tackle to save their lives on that game. Lombardi was rolling in his grave. What do I see? A bunch of grab. No tackling out there. And that's what it was. Arm tackle, break. And that was why the Bucs played the way that they did. But so again, I like the format. I like the format, Rich.
Captain, my comment on that one, and we saw that in Denver actually earlier in the year, and to our defensive coordinator's credit, he basically just lit a fire under the team and said, you want that to happen again? You look like fools. And was, and he really did a great, look, we got just to steal a great term from a great former Bronco player, Mark Schlereth, we got mollywopped out there by the Dolphins. Like it was just an absolute we got taken out behind the barn and shot a few times. You know what I mean? And to the defense's credit, and to Vance Joseph's credit, and to Sean Payton's credit, they all made the requisite changes to the secondary. We got Mathis out. We put McMillan in. We made changes. Like we actually did things to change out personnel. Now, at the same time, we also lit a fire under the defense to say, do you want to be embarrassed and be known as that team? Or do you want to be known as the team that didn't do well but came back and finished strong? And that's a coach. Like, that's a true coach. As much as Broncos fans never like to give Vance Joseph credit, you have to give him credit for the turnaround that he was able to have with our defense, generally speaking. Now, looking at the Eagles, or Eagles, as you said, they had the opposite problem. They started out very strong as a team. And what that tells me is their coach didn't maintain that level of urgency within the locker room for that team. Yes, guys, your poop doesn't stink. It smells like roses. Wait, was that a fart or was that a bouquet? Like, you got to stop the nonsense. At some point, you have to just call a duck, and you have to say, look, you suck. You're not tackling right, and you have to look at yourself in the mirror, and you got to light a fire under those players, because you got to basically say, do you honestly think that we want you back if you're not going to put a good product on the field next year? Do you honestly think that I'm not going to come out and slam the secondary, including you, for not tackling guys when you should? Like, and that has to be called out to these professionals. They cannot be going out there with impunity. They can't just think that they can do whatever they want, however they want. Their results matter. Other teams will watch that film, and their take on those players will be permanently and forever altered based on the tape that they've now seen, because they know that those players do not have self-motivation. They know that they are only motivated by coaching, and that matters. Right?
Yeah.
Like that is like Alex, you and I both come from at least you were college, and I was on the national side here in Canada on the rugby front, not necessarily football, but it's still an absolute violent sport on all accounts. And so, when you look at that stuff, as your coach looking at you, if you're not the dude that they don't have to say anything to, then you're part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's completely fair, right?
And you could tell, because both Philly Sports Guy and myself, we looked at each other when we're watching Kelsey. The Kelsey I do like.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The Kelsey who I do like, we knew Monday night that was his last game. He didn't announce it until yesterday. But we knew Monday night, the way he walked off that field, the body language and the look in his eyes. I'm sure they probably showed it on NFL Network and the close-ups on ESPN. But we saw it personally, and tell you, when you watch it personally and you don't have the abject view of what a TV camera shows you, because you lose a lot in the resolution. You see it right in front of you. Yes, granted, it was farther away, but he walked right by us. And that expression on his face, we saw it. We looked at each other. He said, "He's done.
That's it. Yeah,
He's
that's
done.
it.
That's it." And that's the way it was. So it was unfortunate, and it was good that, hey, the Raiders might not have made the playoffs this year, but I certainly did.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go.
And Captain, that's exactly what I'm referring to, though. Kelsey was never the problem.
No, he wasn't. He
Okay?
wasn't.
The dude left the game as perhaps
Still a
the number
first-team
one.
All-Pro.
He was the number one center in the league, and I don't even know that anyone's arguing with that.
Well, see, my point on him retiring was I wanted to bring it
I
back.
will add that he said on his own show he hasn't announced anything yet, but I think by how he talked about it, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. Well, see, and here's the thing, and I was bringing it back to what you were saying about how the Eagles were 10-1, and then they lose like 6 of their whatever they lost
Right.
was like 5
Right.
or whatever, because he saw the airplane going down, and he's saying, I signed up for this year because I thought we were going back to the show, and that we would make amends, and we would beat whoever the AFC threw at us, and then it was loss. And he said, and I signed up for this? No.
Yeah.
And I can see what's going on in the locker room. And again, I like Sirianni he's a very egotistical, ballsy effer, but you know what? That only grates on you for so long until you can lose the team being that same ballsy effort. And I think you might have lost the team that way.
Well, you also end up in a position when you start coaching in that regard or that way, in that style, where you become a bit of what I refer to as a fig jam, where
I know what Big Jam is.
Yeah. Just for the benefit of the audience, it's I'm good, just ask me, and I'll let you figure out what the F stands for.
Felonious, fallacious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the problem is that when you got a guy that's like that, and you have someone who's looks in himself in the mirror and says, "Hey, how you doing?" You end up with problems, and that's all fine and good when everything is 10-1.
Yeah.
Right.
It's funny and cool when you're winning. It's annoying as hell when you lose.
Yeah, exactly. And so you end up in this spot. You end up in this conundrum where, when you're winning, it's great. When you're not, it's not. And I think they were in a position where it was not and it's not. And now what? And so someone who's at the back end of their career, Alex, I think we even spoke about this last show, which is what's going to give a veteran guy the drive to move to a team that they might take a vet deal or a discount or anything of that nature. Well, Kelsey came back for the discount, and it's not really a discount per se, but the discount, of potentially putting his body through hell.
Yeah. To get back to another Super Bowl.
Knowing that he had the team that was good enough to get there. And instead, he ended up with a bunch of young guys and a coach who's like, "Oh, our crap doesn't stink. It's like roses in a bouquet of flowers."
They definitely had that Super Bowl hangover. I got the sense from watching them that you just thought that they just assumed it would all work itself out,
Right.
Kind of similar with the Chiefs, right? Like the Chiefs seemed to be in a similar boat, but they started to make adjustments and go about playing a game a little different, whereas the Eagles just went out and tried to do the same crap that they, routinely did, and it just never changed anything. On top of they lost both of their coordinators became head coaches, and I think that doesn't, especially because Sirianni's not the play calling type of coach. I think that certainly plays a factor in it as well, or exposed maybe some things. Like you were saying, it's all funny and likable when you're winning, but then it's all pretty annoying and antagonizing when it's the opposite. So
yeah. And I think a guy like Bill Belichick, for example, who has a very crass attitude towards things, again, similar concepts, similar ideals there, which is, your approach can be that way for sure, but you better be winning games, and you better put forth a plan, and you better also make sure that you've got motivators to motivate your team if that's not the type of guy you are. And more importantly, if you're falling 6 games, you better be saying, you light a fire or you're gone. And for example, where's the firing now?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think Sirianni's meeting with the team execs Friday, so.
Well, no, but I'm not even necessarily saying Sirianni needs to be fired, but at the same time, at some point, you got Captain. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry because I have no clue what the hell was going on in the next room, but a very excited Filipina is watching a game or something, and I was like, that's why I put it on mute. But I can't put it off mute because, like I said, I have it on pause on the TV, so when I get my phone, I can take a picture and then go. Anyway, but Sirianni was put on notice, saying, "Okay, yeah, you got us to the Super Bowl." And I think it was his second year. I think it was his second year that he got to the Super Bowl, and this is his third year. And somebody can answer the phone. So he's put on notice and said, "Hey, what worked for you last year is not working anymore. So this is your wake up call, okay?
Right.
If the team comes out flatter, then." I can use the analogy, but I don't want to be. Never mind. If it comes out that flat next year, don't be surprised if whoever they do, because they'll probably make some new hires in Philly in the off season with somebody in mind that if he screws up, guess what? That person that they hire is going to be the interim head coach to get things back on track. I can see it coming.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. And that's exactly what I'm saying, is that what you saw in Denver was the right approach. Obviously, Denver's season didn't end up exactly where we wanted, but we went from a 5-win team to an 8-win team. And yet we started 1-5. Yeah. So all arrows were pointing that we were going to end up with another 3 or 4 wins at best, and yet we ended up at 8 wins. You only get that way by having competent coaching that identifies problems and takes a subpar roster and outperforms with it. And that's the point. Sirianni has an above average roster, but somehow managed to completely underperform with it. It's the exact opposite problem. Mm-hmm. And so I completely agree with that sentiment, which is you can't ride your own coattails and look at yourself in the mirror and give yourself a little chef's kiss and say, how you doing, good looking, if you're not actually doing a good job and or always looking to improve. You have to constantly think, what can I do to be better? How can my team be better? Otherwise, there's the old adage, which is, if you're not improving, you're getting worse. Right? And I think that's a very appropriate and apt analogy for the NFL. This league is always going forward. They are always getting better. They are always improving. And he needs to get with the program, or he's going to be, in a state of shock in maybe only 1 year's time if he doesn't do something drastically different. But getting back to the middle block here of the show, guys, I think it's important to kind of go through a little bit of our respective teams and talk about some news. And Alex, that's before we then jump back into your upcoming game to kind of close out the show. So obviously, the Chiefs are the only AFC West team that are in the playoffs. We have all.
I missed that.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Oh, I was all dressed up too.
Yep. So Captain, I'm glad that you didn't just try to go to the playoff game for the Las Vegas Raiders. That's a good thing.
No, I checked up my flights in time, so I was all dressed up, and
okay.
I went from the airport and I went over to the closest stadium, and they let me in anyway.
Okay, perfect.
So
Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome.
I was good.
Awesome. And so as the rest of us look ahead to inevitable changes that, if we're going to be blunt and honest with ourselves, need to take place for the Chargers and the Raiders, Captain. We're in a early stage of limbo as it comes down to coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And for the Raiders and Chargers, actually, the general manager spot is also vacant. So I haven't heard anything. I don't know if you've heard anything, but
I've heard a few things.
But I actually personally believe that the Raiders would be in a very poor position if they did not hire Champ Kelly.
Maybe not. I now the latest that I heard today was that for those that are waiting, Kelly and Pierce appear to be coming back into the fold. What the curveball is that there are some that are saying that the Raiders want Dobbs to be the GM with Kelly as the assistant GM as he was last year. And Dobbs has a very I can't remember what the actual adjective I want to use. He's very proficient at picking talent. So his evaluations are top notch, and they want to add him to the fold, but they don't want to lose Kelly in doing that. So again, this is the latest that I'm hearing, is that the Raiders have already done their due. Yeah, you said doo. Anyway, their due with the Rooney Rule, which I don't want to say like I said, Al Davis had minorities before they were even thought of there being a rule about it because the Steelers screwed up. But they've done their searches, they've done their interviews with respective candidates that are minorities. They've had Frazier from the late of the Vikings, and I can't remember what team he was with recently, but he went from the Vikings to another team. He came in as a coaching candidate, and there was another candidate that came in who was a minority. So you are required 2 outside minority candidates, and the key word being outside, because they used to bring people in on their own staff and say, well, hey, we did it, and like, you got to go outside. So they have 2 outside minority candidates for coaches. And what's the word I'm looking for is that they did not entertain any interviews with names. None of the names that are out there came into Las Vegas. None of them. Belichick was seen with Mark Davis the other day, and I got that from a good source. And I'm like, oh my God, please don't tell me that. But Harbaugh, well, if you told me that, you didn't tell me that because I didn't hear it from you. I heard it from somebody else.
I know. I didn't.
Harbaugh,
no, I put a thumbs up with my stamp of approval.
Yeah, Harbaugh never came because he was going to L.A. and then there was word that I think it was like one of the East Coast teams wanted to entertain him, but he was never on the radar.
He was interviewed by the Falcons.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
And Chargers.
And Belichick was actually seen on the yacht for the Falcons owner. And there was no interviews with Pete Carroll, who actually has a Super Bowl, should have 2.
Yeah.
And what is it? The late of the Titans, the ex
Vrabel.
Mike Vrabel didn't come in either. So none of the names came in. They did the interviews with the minority candidates, and what is probably the most obvious thing to see is that both Kelly and Pierce were seen at MLK events representing the Raiders.
Yeah.
And that Kelly is in on the interview process for who will be the next coach. It doesn't really take a rocket scientist to figure out that at least Kelly's coming back with a job.
Yes.
Because he's in on the process. And if that's true, it looks to be that AP is going to keep his job. And I have no problem with that as long as you get a offensive coordinator that's worth his stuff. And that might be where Cliff Kingsbury comes in, because allegedly he is going to interview as the OC. And he has head coaching experience in both college and the pros. So that would be a dynamic OC that the Raiders can have. And I think that would be something that could work for the Raiders next year if all of those widgets come into place. And actually, if Dobbs comes in as the GM, that's even a bonus, because having both Dobbs and Kelly, who are both very adept at evaluation of talent, yes, there's going to be a little bit of yin and yang of who wants who and who thinks who's better. But I'd rather have two guys that can evaluate talent and fight amongst themselves than have two guys that don't know what the F they're talking about and then fighting amongst themselves. So I'm good. I'm good with a bunch of different things if it happens that way.
So, Captain, I have a couple concerns with your Raiders in terms of how they're going about this. In my opinion, because you moved on from your GM and coach as early as you did, I would have hoped at least that you would have been further along in your GM search than you are now. I'm also concerned that you haven't heard any scouting changes, and so
you're not. Hey, Rich, I'm gonna hold you on that one. First off, you're not going to have any changes in scouting, period, until after the draft. The scouts are going to remain. The scouts are going to remain on scene with their evaluations. They're going to turn them in for the draft, and it's up to the GM to take that input and use it or throw it away. You're not going to see a changes in the scouting department until after the draft, period. What do you say? Period, stop, whatever?
Full stop, period.
Full stop, period. Thank you. I appreciate you filling me in on the stuff that is yours anyway. It doesn't matter about the scouting changes, because it's going to be the GM to do it. And you're saying that the only reason why, since I cut you off, I might as well go full barrel. It doesn't matter, in my estimation, that said, well, I think you should be a little bit along on your GM. You can only do so much during the season anyway, because it takes and who's to say that the Raiders weren't scouting who they're going to have is coming in for the GM, that they haven't with these people lined up, because you got to wait to the end of the season to ask anyway. And if you see what maybe your candidates were and said, and then you look at what they might be doing during the season, how their teams are doing, said, hey, we really had our eye on this guy, but you know what? Their team flamed out, so throw him out the window. And they had Tedesco in there. That was just to get a number in there that we actually looked. And I'm sorry to say, the young lady that came in from the Broncos, that was a Chick Rooney rule in that respect. It was due for the fact that she was a minority as a lady, okay? But I don't want you to say, I think that you kind of screwed up your search for it. No, Rich, one thing I've learned as a Raider fan for 50 years is all of the people that think they know what's going on or have an idea as to what's going on have no freaking clue what reality is inside Raiders headquarters. Granted, it's gotten a little bit more viewable because it was opaque as foxtrot when Al was in charge. And it only has gotten a little bit more clearer to see since Mark is in charge. But I'm just saying, you can think what you want. Alice can think what he wants. I can think what I want. But the reality is a lot of times very far from what you think is going to happen. I'm just saying.
So where I was actually going with that
Oh,
is,
before I went on my tangent, I'm sorry.
yes. I mean, look.
With all due respect.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly. But where I was going with that is simple, which is, all right. So if you think, let's just, for argument's sake, let's just assume that Mark Davis has actually landed on Champ Kelly being your GM because he's been extremely impressed with how he's handled himself. Which, by the way, Champ Kelly, from everything that I have heard from every interview and all, like, and not just like one or two sources, I'm talking like 4 dozen different sources, is that he is legit professional and within an upper tier of the NFL in terms of talent evaluation. So I want to set that as kind of the bar, right? So, and by the way, he was also interviewed for other GM jobs across the NFL already. He's actually already been brought in, right?
Yes.
So we have to throw that out there as well. My whole point and reason for that comment is simple. Is Champ Kelly has the credentials, and he's kind of already proven himself, as far as I'm concerned, that he really ought be a GM at this point. So the question is, if he's your guy, and it sounds like it's possible that he probably is, then you're already doing the right things internally to progress that forward by having him involved in the head coaching searches and all that kind of stuff. So fair enough. My only point is that should be somewhat, or maybe more so, signal to the rest of the league that you've already chosen your GM. And I'm a bit surprised that as a result of that GM being found, because I'm at this point here, I'm assuming he is your GM, that there hasn't been conversations and communications out there to simply put it out there that the Raiders might be on the hunt for new scouts. And I'm not saying that you would do that necessarily before the draft, but I am saying that it would be in your best interest as an organization, much like any corporation that is looking for specific talent, to say, we're hiring, right? You publicly put it out there so that any scout from any other team, including ones that you may be indirectly or directly interested in, that you could kind of just, toss a little something their way to kind of show them that you're interested in new talent for perhaps certain scouting areas and scouting positions. That's the only direction that I was kind of taking that in, especially.
If I can't, you might want to put up Ed Winchell's comment, because that says it all right there.
So
for folks that have been with the organization, and I don't count myself as being a part of the organization, but I am a 52-year member of a very serious, know what the fuck I'm talking about within the organization. And apologies for dropping the bomb, but it had to be said. For folks that know, we know. And I got the best compliment I ever had. Best compliment I've ever had recently, because I've had some really good ones. When Stuart Schweiger told me the other night when we were on a show, and I deferred to Stuart Schweiger because I said, that guy, if he says X, Y, and Z, you got to take it for a fact that at least he knows what the hell he's talking about, because he's played in the NFL. And all of these little armchair people that think they know don't know. And he said, Cap, I'm going to let you know something as well. He said, just because you have not been a player doesn't mean that I don't appreciate and respect the words that are coming out of your mouth, because you know what the hell you're talking about after all these years of being a student and a historian and somebody that studies what's going on. And that was the best compliment that I could have had from anybody in a while when Stewart recognized me for that, because I deferred to him and he deferred right back to me. So again, it's not that we don't know. It's just that we've been around a while and we know things from different people and can infer through the tea leaves of different things. And that's why, like I said, the Raiders are still not, it's not 32 teams in the NFL. It's still 31 teams in the Raiders. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it still kind of is that way. The Raiders are off on their own tangent, good, bad, or indifferent.
Fair enough. I actually like the way the Raiders are going about their search, and the way that they're doing it is they want to do the GM first, as my understanding, and then like the head coach. And I think that's great. I actually love that approach. I love that approach. You're doing the hierarchical structure properly. I think that's an appropriate thing, and that's they should be commended for that. However,
and they didn't do it. They didn't do it the last several times.
No, they didn't
do it the last several times. It was ass backwards.
So I actually love that approach. I think that shows maturity from Mark Davis in terms of following more traditional NFL norms that are tried, true, and typically work. So good on him. Credit where credit's due. However, my point being is, when you have your guy and you have your guy, why play cloak and dagger? Why not just, yes, we've got our guy and we're good, is my point, right? And that's
I agree with that. And until I heard today about what might be the monkey in the wrench, is hiring Dobbs to the organization as well. Because I was thinking the same thing. It's like, because it's been put out through various channels that it's Pearson Kelly. And the only thing that's really holding it up is, and I just heard it today, was the Raiders want Dobbs in as well. Okay. And that's what is kind of making things go slow. And Biggs just mentioned a fact, and thank you for that on being on Twitter, Shipmate, is that Richard Seymour, talk about Cheatriots stink, is a part of the process somewhere. He's in Mark Davis's ear, much like he who shall not be named because it makes me throw up, but war number 12 was pick number 199, is also in Mark Davis's ear. Where these guys and how they've gotten into Mark Davis's ear at all, I have no clue. And this is the things like where you're a Raiders fan, you like, what the are you talking about, and how did this guy gain entrance? We don't know. Like I said, Brady, and again, I'll wash my mouth out for saying his name. He is in that in Mark Davis's ear, and he has been for a couple since he retired. He's been the fly in the ointment per se, because there was talk of him coming back and being the quarterback, and then no, he's going to be part owner, or no, he's not going to. But he's still there doing lip service. Richard Seymour, I saw the very last game when he came out into the tunnel, and I'll keep my comments about other things to myself, literally, because I don't want to be put any more black marks on myself within the organization. He came out of the tunnel, came back into the tunnel, and we're like, Richard Seymour? Really? Because the Raiders that were there, that are the ones that you see like every week, are the true Raiders. Jim Otto, Fred Biletnikoff, Jim Plunkett, Ted Hendricks, Woodson. These guys, when they come into the state, even Jay Schrader, who's a friend of mine, they're Raiders. I know Schrader played. Yeah, I get it. But these are guys that are recognized as Raiders. And this is the very first time I've ever seen Richard Seymour into the alumni circle. And now it's come out that maybe he's part of the process of senior leadership. And that's, I'll say like it is, that's troubling at this stage of the process. It's troubling. And that's all it is.
So I guess the natural question there from a Raiders perspective is, you saw the fumbling and obviously, I think this is basically the end for McDaniels. I think he'll only ever be an offensive coordinator on a go-forward basis.
On a good
Yeah.
day. On a good day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think his head coaching shine is now permanently gone.
Unless you've been in a coma for 25 years and don't pick up the internet, then you might be able to talk yourself into a job.
And so I guess the whole point here is, after the last little bit there with Mark Davis and what he has done, is this a culmination of what I would call concerning moves, or is this what you see as Davis recognizing he made a mistake with what he did with McDaniels and wanting to try to find someone who is capable of winning and perhaps helping him?
Yes, exactly. I do say that.
Like
But the point is, he's got a whole slew of people that bleed, breathe, everything silver and black, that will do everything that they can to be the person to give the corporate knowledge. They're Raiders, either 100% or 98%, they're recognized, okay? Those are the guys. And why are we seeing people like Tom Brady, who has nothing to do with the Raiders, nothing, and Richard Seymour at least ended his career as a Raider? And I can honestly say I saw Richard Seymour the very first day he was a Raider. The very first day he was a Raider was the day before their game. They had just gotten him in a trade, and I was going through the complex on a tour, and he was in the whirlpool. Seriously, and I said, we saw him and said, "Hey, Rich, good to see you." And he gave us the howdy doody, hey, whatever, thumbs up. Very first day of him being a Raider, he was in the whirlpool, and I got a chance to see that. Okay, so he played well as a Raider. He didn't soak up a bunch of money like Warren Hippopotamus Sapp. Okay, he didn't soak it up and turn it over and just say, thanks for the money, like Javon Walker and that other defensive back that came over from the Redskins that got $8 million for 8 games. I can't remember what his name was. He got $8 million for 8 games and was the biggest, other than Sapp, waste of money budget that there was. He played well as a Raider. He knocked out and got kicked out of the game for putting an old rapist pervert on his ass in Pittsburgh, and we love him for it. Okay, so he has the Raider up here, but it's quite perplexing that we haven't heard person one of this thing, and now we see it. That's the only thing I'm saying. It's like, it's the things that make you go, and it really is.
Yeah. So I want to now transition over to my Broncos and then quickly discuss the Chargers, and then we'll move on to Alex's game, and then we'll wrap up the show, guys. So that'll be kind of the order of stuff here. So quickly on the female executive that interviewed with the Raiders, she is far more qualified than I think you're giving her credit for, Captain.
Oh, no. No. I did not say.
He said, don't you put that on me, Ricky Bobby.
Oh, exactly. Oh, no. The lady is quite qualified. She's quite qualified, but
Yeah.
I don't think without her, despite her qualifications, I don't think when you put her in line with all the other people that she's been up against, she's not qualified enough. She's quite qualified, and I can almost guarantee you that eventually she will be a general manager in the NFL. Don't throw that one on me. Captain Jack, the friggin' misogynist. No. No, I get enough of that on accident that I want you throwing that shit on me like that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So
I had to catch it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we kind of clarified is that she's got quite the resume. Like, and I mean,
She's
like,
got all her stuff in one sock.
yeah. Like and I think that's an important thing. And she has done so in an industry that it is uncommon for. I mean, the only other female that seems to have a resume that is, obviously superior, but certainly similarly stacked would be Amy Trask.
Well, you forget who the president of the Raiders is, shipmate.
No,
you
I
forget.
No, I get it. No, I get it. But my point is that it is, that's I'm trying to give the audience that may not have the information of the lady that was interviewed there with the Raiders a bit of underpinning background. Is she has that level of acumen behind her. I want to make sure that the audience understands. Like, this is not someone who is.
Oh, she wasn't a token, but she did. Yeah. She did fulfill the rule.
Yes.
Okay. It was a good look. And like I said, for those that don't know out there in AFC West land, the president of the Raiders is a Black Asian female.
Yes.
Bing, bing, bing. So don't say that we don't. Like I said, Amy Trask was a pioneer, love her to death. The president of the Raiders right now is a Black Asian female that has a lot of stuff going her way as well, and knows the Vegas landscape from where she worked before.
And her experience is at an executive level across multiple sports.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
and knows Vegas like the back of her hand.
Exactly. So your president has got that acumen behind her, and that's obviously a fantastic hire for that role. But my point on the Broncos executive is she has been in front offices throughout the Vikings. She's done. She's headed up scouting, all of the things. And for those who don't know, she is effectively the Broncos GM, kind of like number two. Like, so George Payton's the GM, and she is George Payton's kind of secondary or number two in all of the meetings. And so it is literally just a matter of time before
she'll get there.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time before she kind of elevates herself up to a full-blown general manager role. And honestly, from what I can tell from everything I've heard from within Broncos country, well deserving based on the type of input that I'm hearing from her. So good on her. And the other thing is, as soon as George Payton and her took over kind of the front office stuff for Broncos country, you saw a huge shift in what got leaked and how it got leaked. And I think that's a huge testament for how both George Payton and she run the front office of the team. So I think, given your previous comments, Captain, she would actually be a pretty solid hire. And no, that wasn't meant as you need to give.
I trust me. I've been flacked on for being a misogynist.
No, it was.
I was not.
Yeah,
going to take that again. So I appreciate it. I needed to get it out there.
Yeah. It was simply just the fact that a lot of people obviously will probably not know who she is because she is not front-facing necessarily within the Broncos organization either. So I think it would have potentially come off as quite a bit of a surprise to say, why are you pulling from the Broncos organization? And I think that one of the reasons for doing so, and I think you're going to see her get interviews more and more frequently as time goes on, is, it's because she is, just that good. And so I think that's an important kind of note to make. And then as we look forward with the Broncos is there's an offensive coordinator who was released from the Saints. So there's obviously some natural chirping about whether or not there's some synergies there with Sean Payton. I think that is all fair.
Carmichael, right?
Carmichael, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Carmichael,
yep.
That's correct.
See, I pay attention.
Yep. So that's 100% certainly something that could well happen, and maybe it will, maybe it won't. We'll see. And then on the Broncos side as well, there's going to be some natural questions about our general roster? And these are questions I have to check. I don't know if I hit send on the tweet or not, but it is a fair comment, and this is certainly my stance, which is the Broncos have not had a winning record since 2015. Oh, come on now, really? Like,
it's true.
Well, to be fair, McDaniel's got himself fired, but
yeah. But the point here is the Broncos have had a losing record since 2015. 2016 rather was the last time we had a winning record. 2016, we were 9-8 or 9-7. Sorry, 9-7, and we haven't had one since. And so the whole point is that there's a good number of the core of our roster that has been around for almost that length of time, and some of those players are seen as potentially having value on a trade market. They're then also getting to the latter part of their career where they will eventually start tailing off at some point. So do the Broncos want to get value for them while we still can and start getting younger and building draft picks? That is a valid, fair question to make. And it is certainly one that Alex and Captain, I am sure that you already know my answer on, because I've said so out loud. My answer is yes, all of them. Because at this point here, I don't believe you have anything to lose. You need to go through a culture shift. You need to go through a mental mind change. And at some point, there is some validity to some of those old sayings. Can you, in fact, teach an old dog new tricks? And in the current environment, I don't believe the answer is yes. I think their only hope is to move them out, where they are then forced to be the new person again, where they need to relearn a new culture, and maybe then they will then shift their mental mindset. And honestly, I hope they all do. But at the end of the day, we need to do what's
best. Won't know until you do it, though.
Yeah, you won't know till you do it. And I think we need to look at what is in the Broncos' best interest. And I believe the Broncos' best interest right now is to get them picks. We need younger and more talent. And the only way to do that is by moving off some people and some names. Austin Emmons, as an example, who
Sutton,
can potentially Sutton, Judy, etc. Names that people know simply because they are going to have value. And if you're going to be honest, overall, not individually statistically, but overall have not contributed to the Denver Broncos winning.
Yeah. I think that is the only approach that they should take that would get to sustained success.
Correct.
I mean, you look at the other teams that actually committed to a full-blown rebuild. I mean, Miami. I'm sure there's more, but Miami. The Texans. The Texans traded away their perennial franchise guy. Granted, he had a little bit more baggage than some would want, but he was still in the prime of his career.
Yeah.
And got rid of D-Hop, got rid of J.J. Watt in that core, and then, you look at them now, they're like an up-and-rising team. So I think for Denver's, I think the approach you're talking about is the one you have to take when you look at the draft capital you gave up to bring in not only Russ, but Sean Payton. So, I mean, you have to, say, hey, okay, we're going to give you a blank canvas. You do what you want with this, but you better get us to the top. But, I mean, that's going to be the only way to turn it around in the right way without further cap strapping yourself. So, I mean, honestly, I think you got to stay with Russ, obviously stay with Peyton, but, you get rid of Simmons, Sutton, all these other guys, and just, do what you got and the people there and who you bring in, and then just build from there. And maybe draft a Russ replacement, or if you're terrible, you're back in the high realm of picking, and then you can get his replacement. But then you're not, ruining yourself.
I agree with that, Alex, with the addition of, yes, add Danger Russ to that list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Russ has to go
Yeah.
because if you keep
I
him
don't
on
know.
the roster next year and he gets hurt at all, he has a rolling injury guarantee on every year in
Yeah.
his deal, and you just can't do it. Like, you just can't. And so if Russ is,
It's a lot of dead money, though.
well, it is, but at the end of the day, he either performs or he doesn't, and that's on whoever signed that contract. I actually have a different perspective on that contract. If you watched, and for the benefit of all on this show that obviously don't follow the Broncos the same way I do, if you go back and watch Sean Payton's first or second interview when he was in front of the media, he made a comment that said, John Elway has the biggest office in the building, or he still has an office in the building. In that interview, it was on film and on tape. And the whole point is that Russ was brought in the year before Peyton came in. So if John Elway still was in the building and had the big office in the building, then that is just simply confirmation to the previous reports that Broncos country had, that John Elway was still very much an influential force within the front office of the Denver Broncos, even when the narrative was that he wasn't, right? And okay then, so then the question is, now let's look to this year, as in 2024, 2023. How is it that the Denver Broncos are moving on from Russ, but our GM is still employed after signing that trash contract? Well, is it then not possible that maybe Elway was the one that was driving that contract and not our general manager? And because we were under the current ownership group right now, that the ownership simply has a memory longer than 5 seconds long and knows that George Payton was saying, don't do it, and Elway said, do it. And ownership said, well, Elway's Elway, we should listen to him. And now they've come a full 180 and said, oops.
Yeah. What an idiot.
Yeah, like what?
Commit him.
Yeah.
Commit him. Put him in a home.
Right. So my point is that in the land of cap space, or cap, like just the salary cap, what is the most likely scenario? That George Payton kept his job that doesn't count towards the cap at all, with billionaire owners that have more money than they know what to do with? Or that George Payton was perhaps a voice of reason within the front office and said, don't do it. John Elway was still around and said, do it. Now John Elway is done, right? Gone. And George Payton is still there for a reason, because he was, in fact, a voice of reason. And he and Sean Payton are seemingly on the same page. I'm willing to go down that narrative as to why our general manager is still around, rather than the other narrative of, well, Sean Payton just likes the guy. Right? Like the ownership is too pragmatic and too smart from a business perspective to allow subpar coaching, subpar front office contracts and stuff that impact their actual bottom line to stick around after the period of time that we've seen here. And so I actually think it's more likely that the Walton Group saw George Payton rather, and heard what he said, ignored what he said, and now they're regretting it. And that's why he's in fact still there. To me, that makes the most sense. If I'm a business guy, that's why he's still here, because he was obviously right. You know what I mean? Like, that just to me makes the most sense in all of it. And fair enough. So I believe what's going to happen here is we're going to move on from Russell Wilson. I also think it's in the Broncos' best interest to move on from all of those players you just said.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps even more, I think Josie Jewell won't be around. I think Lloyd Cushenberry will be let to walk. I think Lloyd Cushenberry is going to garner a large contract by a center-needy team in the offseason as probably the top offseason offensive center on the free agent market after his play this year. And I think that that's going to probably net out the Broncos a compensatory pick of like the 3rd or 4th round. All of these things I kind of see playing out this next year coming up with the Broncos. And I believe that we are going to aggressively try to rebuild through the draft, which is the right approach. That just is the right approach. And so, yes. So that's kind of where I see the Broncos going. We're going to go right down this rabbit hole coming up in the next shows as the offseason really kicks into high gear. We'll start breaking down each of our rosters in terms of, where we see improvements being needed and projections and all that kind of stuff. And so, Ed, to answer your question, that
To be determined.
That all depends. Are we going to trade a bunch of guys to get the picks, or are we going to keep our guys, which I think is a mistake? At which point, I believe the Broncos will try to likely target another free agent veteran quarterback for a cost-controlled number, and it'll be an open competition. A name to look out for, which is going to be hilarious, by the way, is Drew Lock.
Yeah.
And trust my colleagues on the panel, they're laughing for a reason.
Yeah. He was in the building, baby.
Because he was already in the building. We already had him.
We traded him. Traded him for us.
and who might come back full circle here. I think that'll be really interesting. And yes, seriously, Ed, which is
we discussed this.
You have to look at your cap space. What do you have available to pay top tier free agent quarterbacks? You don't have the money, and you need other talent to be competitive as a football team. It is just that simple. And Sean Payton does not have 3 or 4 years to turn this around. He needs more competent quarterback play because he needs to do as well or better next year than he did this year. And in order to accomplish that, he's going to need to retool the team with guys that are actually wanting to play and have that extra heart. You saw Troutman on the field for the Broncos. You watched him twice a year. That dude did not look the same as the other tight ends on the field. He had heart. He had grit. Where were the other tight ends with that same grit? They didn't exist. The Denver Broncos need guys like that. Period. Zach Wilson, no thank you. Denver soccer mom will not be safe.
Could have the Wilson squared back there.
No, yeah, no. I mean, Zach Wilson, I think is kind of the equivalent of some of the other failed quarterbacks. I think Sam Darnold is in that similar kind of vein. I think you have these groups of quarterbacks that have been ruined by poor teams, and simply that's it. I think that the Broncos are in this reset mode next year, but because of their circumstances, they need to reset without tanking. And it's this fine balance that Sean Payton's going to have to get himself in. That's where I see things going next year for my Denver Broncos.
Hey, I actually like that idea of coming in with Zach Wilson because this way you don't have to change the uniform number. NFL properties will be there. You already got a Wilson there that's in the Broncos colors. You will save a shit ton of money just on, and starting for the Broncos, let's ride Wilson. You don't have to say his first name. Just say Wilson, you're good.
You can literally every week you'd be like, Wilson starting, and you'd be right.
Captain,
exactly.
Captain, there's a problem though.
A problem is something I said.
A huge problem. So there's a huge problem. Zach Wilson is about 4 inches taller than Russell Wilson. None of the uniforms will fit.
Well, they can add on like a layer like this. They can just sew it on.
Oh, okay.
They can sew it on, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and do you know what? I mean, I guess on the flip side, Alex, if my Broncos do in fact keep Russell Wilson, he could just wear heels and they could both look the same.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So we're so
get a little lifts and it's cool.
Yeah, he can reach out to Tom Cruise and figure out where he gets his heels from.
That's the camera angle. For those guys, they'll just shoot it lower.
No, Tom Cruise, and I know it's a small joke. He is small.
Yes, he is.
I've seen him. He
lives in Clearwater, or he's got a house.
Well, I haven't seen him in Clearwater because you can't get close to him in Clearwater with all the security they got for the Scientologists. I saw him in London at a Rainforest Cafe. And he looked like a freaking He looked like a midget.
Yeah.
He looked like a midget.
Well,
It's
Captain, we've actually met in person, and so
yes, we have met in person,
Yeah.
and you're still bigger than me.
yeah, I am. So the thing is just the size differential. I think between me and Tom Cruise would be hilarious.
Well, yeah, because I would dwarf him like you dwarfed me. It would be like a running hill, man.
For the Russian dolls.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So, anyways, interestingly enough, that's kind of where I'm at with the Broncos. I think it's some interesting stuff ahead. I truly think we're going to see major news as soon as the offseason kicks off with the Broncos. And Captain, I think that the Raiders are in some similar interesting ebbs and flows as the offseason approaches. The only thing I think that's of note and important to mention right now, the only thing we've really heard from the Chargers is all of the Chargers fans that I know want Jim Harbaugh.
All three of them?
No, there's a fourth now that Harbaugh might come in.
Oh, okay.
And so
I think
that's not
it's Harbaugh
including
or bust.
yeah, so
that's not including coach. So that would be like 5.
yeah, so I really do think that they truly want Harbaugh as their coach. I can't really blame them. He's got an absolute just pretty rock solid record in terms of what he's done. So, good on them. And I'm not going to lie. I think that's actually rather concerning for the rest of our division because it gives you Andy Reid, potentially Jim Harbaugh, and Sean Payton, who are all proven coaches in the NFL level.
Yeah.
To
Who've all been to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. And so that really does stack the division in terms of quality coaching. And the other thing that it does is they all have long-term relationships. We were talking earlier in the show about the Eagles coach and others. Those younger guys that are they don't necessarily cover one side of the ball fully. They require coordinators to fill what they can't do themselves. Harbaugh, Sean Payton, Andy Reid, they have a Rolodex that basically goes for miles in terms of coordinators and other guys that they can call whenever they need someone to fill in a role. And frankly, they have that depth of bench. A younger guy like a Sirianni and others don't have that depth of bench. They haven't been in the league long enough to have that depth of bench or those additional contacts. And I think that's what you're seeing play out certainly with the Chiefs. I think you're seeing Peyton being able to bring in some interesting guys to the Broncos. And honestly, I think you're going to see some stuff like that occur with the Chargers as well if Harbaugh comes in.
Yeah, well, I think it'll be rather funny when if Pierce is named the Raiders coach, and let me see, he's beaten Sean Payton, he's beaten Andy Reid. So granted, he's 1-1 against Reid. So
he's also been to a Super Bowl.
I'm sorry.
He's also been to a Super Bowl.
Right,
Yep.
He's been to the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
and he's won a Super Bowl too.
Yeah.
So all of these star power coaches, and yeah, it would be star power coaches, but when all is said and done, it's the people that play for you and how they play for you, and you can throw every superpower there is out there, but it's what the team. That's why the team wins, and not necessarily the person that's on the marquee.
Yeah, no, I just think what it does is it brings a different dynamic to the division. Certainly one that hasn't been here in quite some time within the AFC West. The AFC West has had like onesies and twosies in terms of star power and bolster rosters. It's been quite some time where we have had this strength consolidated within the division in terms of competency, right? Like you have to, as much as you want to say it's all about the players and all this kind of stuff.
It's just been coaching stuff. I mean, it's evident by two of them looking for a coach right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Both. I mean, hell, the Chargers are the Super Bowl champ. The start of day one of the next season. By the time we hit the next calendar year for this season, they're going to start saying the Chargers are going to win the Super Bowl. I mean, can't deny that their roster's stacked. The Raiders obviously have a great young roster and some. I mean, Devontae Adams is still one of the best wide receivers in the league. Like, every team has a solid roster. It's just been finding the person to get them to play, to the full potential. And I think in Vegas, you saw Antonio Pierce was able to do that. I mean, almost night and day different turnaround. To some degree, you saw Peyton do that. I mean, at least taking a team that was essentially the laughing stock of the league last year and getting 8 wins out of them without really making any major changes other than approach and scheme. But then, the Chargers, you just continue to see them regress despite having guys in the top 5 ranks of their position group across the league. And so I think that's been the problem with our division being as competitive as we thought it would be. I think when we started the show, or when I got on the show, that was the hype, right? Was the AFC West is going to be the gauntlet because Devontae's in Vegas and Russ is in Denver. And I think that still could be there. It's just a matter of these. I think Denver's got their guy. It's just figuring out what to get him, what he needs.
Yeah.
I think the Raiders have their guy too. It's just getting him the supporting cast that he would need.
And don't be surprised if Devontae is gone there, brother. I'm just saying.
I think if you can, I think this is the time to do it. I mean,
exactly.
Especially if you're, I guess my only reservation with that would be if they're going to QB early, you might want him as a nice, security blanket to let your guy develop. But maybe, but it depends on the value you can get for him too.
Yeah, and if I may interject, it's like the games that Devontae Adams was just the dynamic power with the 6, 7, 8 catches and over 100 and things like that. I think the 4 games that he had over 100 yards in receiving and had 6 or 7 catches, of those 4 games, the Raiders won one of them. The games that he was either blanked 1 or 2, the Raiders won all of those games because they fed other people. And it's just a matter of, again, the one thing I will say about the Cheatriot way that I agree with is you get rid of a guy a year early rather than a year late.
Yeah.
That works. And getting what you can from Devontae Adams on a big contract that you get rid of, and you get as much as you can for him, a player and some picks to rebuild, you get rid of him. Because again, for all the things that he did this year, he didn't do enough. And again, I like Adams. And I said you can guarantee that he's going to be gone because every time I buy a jersey of a current player, they're gone. And I bought a Devontae Adams jersey. I also bought a Crosby jersey, and I'm like, please, Lord, don't let this be.
He can't leave. Crosby's getting whatever money he wants.
Yeah.
See, Captain, the one thing that the Patriot way always had is they had a plan with other offensive players
behind him.
That was behind him.
Yeah.
I actually think you have Myers, who's shown to be one heck of a player on your roster.
Myers was the number 1 receiver on our roster this year.
Yeah, and so
Myers was also signed because he's from the Patriots. I mean, and it was McDaniels' choice, but it worked out.
I was going to say when we got rid of McFired's playbook, he was still the number 1 receiver on our roster, and he earned it. And the people that know, they're clamoring for Jacoby more than they're clamoring for Devontae because they see what Jacoby does, his attitude, and what he brings to the team. And Devontae, every time I've seen him, the typical, and again, maybe he's a nice guy and I shouldn't be talking like this, but every time I saw Devontae Adams, it's prima donna. Jacoby Myers was everything you wanted in a ham sandwich, very accommodating to the fans. And he was the guy that's He was the Reggie Jackson. He was the man that stirred the drink this year.
That's funny.
And that's true because Anna knows. Anna knows in Vegas.
No, but that's legit funny. Like that.
Oh, but
like
and it's legit true.
It is, but it's still hilarious. I think it's actually.
This is also true. Oh, this one's also true. Who also got signed because he is from the Patriots, in my opinion. But
yeah. And you know what? But we're gonna get rid of that mistake post June 1st, split it over 2 years, and be done with it.
I mean, in fairness, he did spend at least half of that back in the city of Las Vegas on strippers. So
no, that's not true. He spent a lot of that in Reno.
Okay.
Penn State.
Yeah. But so that's kind of where I kind of see our team sitting and how things are going and whatnot now. Alex, to close out the show real quick, let's do a very brief recap of your upcoming game this week. I'll throw it over to you. We'll all make a few comments, and anyone in the chat with comments or questions on Casey's upcoming game, go ahead and leave those down below, and we'll get those answered by Alex and all of us here before we close out.
Yeah. Obviously Chiefs are advanced to the divisional round. We're actually the last team to know who they were playing because of the postponement up north in Buffalo. But we'll be traveling to Buffalo to play the Bills Sunday. I think Buffalo's 3-point favorites right now, but I think
it'll be balmy. It'll be balmy up in Buffalo compared to what you're coming from.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to snow there more, but I think it'll be still that cool playoff atmosphere for it. Both teams are playing pretty well right now. Buffalo's definitely the hotter of the two. They're on a 6-game win streak. KC's won 3. Ironically, this is the first time in Mahomes' career that he actually has to play a true road playoff game, so that'll be exciting to see how that's different. Obviously we know the history between the two teams. Buffalo's been the regular season champion, whereas KC, when they do clash in the playoffs, has been able to get the better of them. That being said, certainly a different Chiefs team than we've had in the last 2 playoffs. I don't see this offense scoring in 13 seconds. Is the way I'm trying to get at there. And going back to the previous game in December, Bills won 2017. That was the notorious Kadarius Toney foot was on the line game. So I mean, right there, it kind of tells you how close of a game it was. And I'd also add that game was when Pacheco was out, Drew Tranquil was out, a lot of key contributors were out. So factoring that in, I do think that we're going to have a close game. Going to probably come down to the last possession, as most of these usually have.
This is game of the week.
Oh yeah, this is the playoff matchup.
Right? Yeah, this is game of the week. I don't care who you are. Yeah.
Pre-Super Bowl.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking back at the last game, defense did pretty well containing the Buffalo's offense. Outside of giving up James Cook they contained it pretty well on the ground, but he had 83 yards and a touchdown through the air. And that was mostly on a totally untouched route right up the seam, whereas that was the product of Drew Tranquil not being out there because he was wide open because miscommunication with the linebackers. But either way, defense did pretty good in containing Josh Allen and the Bills offense then. Outside of some mistakes, we had a Mahomes interception. I think Rashee Rice fumbled, as well as the Kadarius Toney conundrum. Chiefs played pretty well too. So I basically trying to say I didn't see anything from looking at the stat sheets from the previous game, as well as going back and watching some of it to make me think that this is going to not be, it's going to be one-sided one way or the other. I do think it's, like I said, it's going to be the playoff game of the whole the whole
Playoff.
rundown here. Yeah. And I think will come down to the final, minute, 2 minutes. Biggest keys for Chiefs. Number one is continue to protect the football. I know I talked about it at length last week. Well, really any week, but when they have at least if they have more than one turnover, pretty much they just don't have the offensive prowess to come back from that. So they can't be doing that, and especially in this game. Certainly saw them protect the football pretty dang well in crappy conditions and against a good team. So you hope they can continue that confidence and kind of that vibe going into this one. As well as, you're playing Josh Allen, who's kind of a very much a feast or famine QB, in my opinion. I mean, for a 4-week stretch, he's the undisputed MVP, and then another 4 weeks, it's like, why is he losing his team games? So going against a player like that, you have to be on your A game and hope that, defensively they can get after him enough to force him to play hero ball a little bit and undoubtedly probably make at least one of those mistakes. I know they got a pick against him the last time they played, so certainly a big proponent of success for this game. Same thing with that. They got to continue the pass rush that they've had really these last, really all season. I think they were finished second in the league in sacks total, but they're going up against a good offensive line. Bills are right up there with the Chiefs in terms of Bills' offensive line was 1 and least amount of sacks. Chiefs were 2. So, they got a formidable opponent on that side, but, need to look to, like I said, get after Allen, continue to get him in pressure, force him to step up in the pocket or feel that he's got to leave the pocket early and rush through something. Because as the year-long, really career-long resume has shown, he's more likely than not going to make a mistake at some point. So,
can't see it. Sorry.
If they can continue those two things, as well as, continue the kind of secondary magic that we've experienced. We talked about Snead. But just, as a whole, they've been pretty successful across the board defensively, but especially through the air. If they can keep that up, which we haven't really seen any signs of that being the opposite here, but if they can keep that up, those are kind of the things that will get them into position to win. And really, it's going to come down, I think, to a field goal or the last possession, and that's where Money Harrison Butker, the franchise record holder, will come in to put one through the uprights. And my final prediction is Chiefs 24, Bills 21. So let me look at what. I would much rather they draft a guy like absolutely Rome. If they can somehow figure out how to get him, I'd be all for that. But they're going to have, I think, a good amount of cap space. Looking forward with that. But I think that you've shown, if you can get the right guy, they can fit into this offense. Rashee Rice was a 2nd-round pick, but that was the guy that, Mahomes threw routes to during the drafting process and told the front office, hey, that's the guy I want. And we saw them get pretty good success out of him. And that was someone that in a pretty wide receiver heavy class that they didn't have to spend a 1st-round pick on. So I'm more for, finding younger talent. Scott Norwood. Yeah, he was until he wasn't. But yeah, I'm all for finding, younger talent rather than paying a bunch of money to someone that, could hit a total regression at some point. But, at the same time, still focus on this season. But I do think that we will see a serious overhaul in the wide receiver room, just with how this season's gone. MVS, that guy, I think he earned $14 million this year, and to catch 13 balls and drop 25. So
don't throw it to stone hands.
Yeah. Troy Franklin. There's a lot of good receivers in this class too. But I think it'll just be, and I think that's the interesting thing with the draft class is I feel like there's probably 4 to 5, maybe even 6 QBs that could somehow be in the round one conversation, which will push some other guys who might, in other classes be a top 10, top 15 pick lower down. And the Chiefs, have certainly shown that they're not afraid to trade up and get a guy that they want. I mean, they did it to get Mahomes. They did it to get Trent McDuffie, who ironically the Bills wanted. There's actually footage of the Bills room when it says the Chiefs are trading up. They're like, you can tell they all knew and then who they got was their guy. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good receivers, and I do think we see the Chiefs, like I said, overhaul their room. I think the only person that's returning that is a wide receiver now is that's guaranteed is Rashee Rice, which is saying a lot considering there's 8 other guys there. But we'll see how that shakes out once the season's done. That being said, hopefully they continue on the kind of with the confidence and poise that they came in against the Dolphins with. I do think this game, it could go 50-50. Bills are certainly a hot team. They just have yet to make it over that playoff hump. And the Chiefs have historically been, at least in the Josh Allen era, been the ones to get in the way. And I think kind of it's the perfect storms brewing for KC to, get hot at the right time. But that being said, if they come out and don't protect the football, no chance they win.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, we're going to get more into it next week and the week after and the week after that. But KC is going to be an interesting team this offseason because they've made it, second round in the playoffs. And so, while if you're going to be honest, you were a shell of yourself this season from what you've typically been. If we're being perfectly honest, like you present yourself as being
offensively.
Yeah,
I mean, they still were successful. It's just totally different than the Chiefs' way, whereas they had a dominating defense and middle of the pack offense.
Right, right. That's what I'm saying is that it was for all the wrong reasons in an Andy Reid led team, right? Like Andy Reid is give me all the offense, and I guess if I have to have a defense out there, then cool. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
that's
pretty much.
Oh, right.
I mean,
it's just crazy. And this year, it was no. My defense is lights out, and it's like I guess I have an offense that'll look like average.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just so bizarre. So bizarre.
And I think I also think that kind of full circle brings us to what we were talking about of like signing Jones or Snead. It's like that situation is why you can only sign one of them because you have to. It was the wide receiver room was the product of them spending money to fix the offensive line on top of paying to keep their, productive defensive players in house, knowing, hey, we got this QB on this rookie contract. Let's see what we get. And then, then the Holmes contract kicked in. And it's like, well, we're going to trade Tyreek to get picks back and not have to pay him because we can't, and we can't do all of it and keep the defensive pieces. And then you see now it's like, well, the cheap wide receiver route didn't necessarily work out. So, you're going to have to make a change there, and then they're going to have to make a sacrifice somewhere else.
No, I agree. So going ahead, looking ahead to this game, this is definitely going to be me finding some place where I can watch it on a big screen. I might watch it on the 135 inch projector screen here in the basement, or I might be going
not to be throwing those numbers out there to impress anybody.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
With all due respect,
I'm not. It's just I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I have to watch this game. I think on a larger screen because I think it'll be at least 2 to 3 plays on from both teams that will be highlight reel worthy because this is that game in my opinion. Very similar to what we saw. I mean, if we're being honest, the other Chiefs game was actually a pretty solid one too. a closer game than it actually looked on the scoreboard for between yourself and Miami. I mean, obviously the Chiefs were dominating, but there were certainly moments there where Miami looked like they could potentially come back and get in it. But then the Chiefs always seem to find something within that game to kind of stick around and hold it, right? So very good game despite the score for KC versus Miami. And so I think this is going to be the game of this weekend for sure, in my opinion. With that in mind,
I think that I'm going to say this before you shut me up, because I'm going to say that just like the Packers are the Cowboys' kryptonite, okay, that the Bucks are the Eagles' kryptonite.
Yeah,
I think, and I think because Kansas City got their crap together at the right time, that Kansas City has been the Bills' kryptonite, and it's gonna go their way. Okay,
I'm knocking on wood with that one.
I'm just saying, it's like now. Granted, obviously, I'm rooting against my shipmate here.
Well, yeah,
I can't stand it, friggin' team. But like I said, if you talk about the kryptonite matchups, this is the third kryptonite matchup, and I think that it's going to bode well that Kansas City has finally gotten out of their slumber to play the way that they have been playing. Now, I think that if it comes down to the next game, and I see the Ravens being the last obstacle, I think the Ravens will probably win that. But I see Kansas City getting over Buffalo and then losing to Buffalo.
Salute, Ed.
That's my highest as well.
That's the highest compliment you're going to get from any opponent.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, that will do it for the show for tonight. I really do appreciate all of you joining us live. Again, anyone joining us after the fact or currently right now, before you leave, click those like buttons down below. Leave a comment if you're joining us after the fact. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us live tonight. Where the West Side is the best side, we will see you next week. Peace!
Yarg!
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle. Wait a minute, work hard for the car.